Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities. And it's going to be really an amazing experience. And I look forward to you joining me on the jar. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mental Health Today. I'm your host, Ken Stearns, and a beautiful day here in Portland where I'm hanging out with the grandkids. It's kind of a post-Christmas, this is a post-Christmas pre-2024 episode, probably one of my last episodes this year. Since we started the program in March 3rd of this year, we've got about 120, almost 130 episodes of really amazing people on the front lines of the mental health crisis. You saw the little intro there, and I'm talking about the JAR journey that I did across the U.S., about 330 people in 96 cities that I've interviewed. Really surprised at the mental health crisis that I got to see up close and personal, and started this show, as I said, in March to find out and meet some of the people that are trying to affect change. And very surprised at the different kinds of therapies that I was totally unaware of. I was assuming that I was going to interview a lot of therapists who were talking about what they're seeing, on the couch and how they're trying to prescribe and talk people through, kind of healing. And fantastically, I have been exposed to so many different ways and opportunities and ideas, and seeing the creative people who are in that front space, especially finding out my favorite story is people like our next guest, Dr. Nazeer, that started out in one way and have kept an open mind. This is the kind of way I'd want to articulate it, and finding what works, and reading and learning and being very open to change and open to the best possible way for their patients, and really putting the patient first, even though no matter what kind of training they went through and what kind of system that they were in, they've kind of found a way. And Dr. Nazeer, really appreciate your story as I kind of look through and see your journey, your career journey, and then now opening up all these stores, opening up all these clinics, and also seeing, you're starting at some really small towns, in some really interesting parts of the U.S., and to end up in Chicago where you're at, with a number of clinics. So, Dr. Nazeer, welcome to Mental Health Today. Thanks for taking time out to share with the audience your story.
Thank you, Ken. I definitely appreciate being given this opportunity to be on this show, and I think you've been doing awesome work. I looked through a lot of your past episodes and have seen amazing guests on this show before me. So happy to be here and really being able to kind of explain a little bit on my journey, and then really what I'm up to now and how we're trying to help play our role in this mental health crisis that we're in.
Yeah, maybe I'd kind of ask a little bit of the journey, and then what, because you had a pretty traditional kind of start, and where did the light bulb come on? Where did you kind of go, aha, man, maybe I should look here, or I'm not, what was that like? How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Sure. I mean, my residency training was at Louisiana State University in Shreveport, Louisiana, and different part of the country, but I'm from Chicago, born and raised here in the Chicago area.
Okay.
But, out there for psychiatry training, and when I was finished up my residency, and then I was working at the post-traumatic stress disorder clinic for a year, and that ended up going into private practice. Very traditional jobs, like inpatient settings, outpatient, partial programs, intensive outpatient programs, different medical directorships. The tools I was using to try to help patients was basically, medication management and some psychotherapy. And success rates are not the best with traditional pharmacology for like antidepressants. And there's some data, like big studies in the past, like the STAR*D trial, and showed 30% efficacy basically for oral antidepressants. And that's generally what we were seeing. We were doing symptom management, getting to the root cause of of the root conflict of, why was somebody anxious, or what was the trauma, or what's the driving force. Therapy can take a while, just psychotherapy,
Hmm.
counseling can take a while. Medications can take a while to work as well. Then they come with side effects. They come with high
Hmm.
dropout rates. Uh, But that's all we had, and uh,
Yes.
I was a psychopharmacologist. I mean, that's really what I was focused on. I would try to improve my odds by doing things like pharmacogenetic testing and trying to leverage, somebody's genetic
Okay.
makeup with regards to medications, and try to improve the odds of avoiding failed trials and getting to the right.
Hmm.
And that helps some. But then, around 2016, I had made a decision. I want to open up my own practice. But what was the driving force behind that was actually following the data that was coming out from other studies, like at the National Institute of Mental Health, Dr. Zarati's landmark study from 2013 about IV ketamine and how you can utilize that. And it gave the framework of how to, I guess, administer it in a way,
Hmm.
doing 6 infusions, it's 40 to 45-minute infusion, doing 6 over 2 to 3 weeks, and then saw what kind of results were, being shown, around 70%, let's say, of
Like,
patients getting a full response. And
just like
that's
wow, like a wow moment, right? See, reading
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's like, wow, that's way better, and how fast it works. And following it more closely and seeing the basically the suicidal ideation reducing effects. I mean, how quickly it can get somebody to stop
Yeah.
focusing on the concept of suicide. And
Yeah.
I've seen it with my own eyes over these years of how many people's lives it had saved just for that one point alone. So then it makes you think, well, okay, at this point there are no clinics offering ketamine in this area, and at least Illinois and the neighboring states.
Okay.
Um, so what I'm going to offer ketamine at this point is kind of a leap, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like to
kind of a big leap for you, right? To completely change almost a career in a way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I knew it would attract some attention, good and bad.
Mhm.
And I knew it was somewhat a little risky, but I wholeheartedly felt, based on what was available to us and when you look at the risk benefit analysis, that this is something that really is going to, you know, crawl its way like into our guidelines and the way we think about, like approaching somebody's
Okay.
psychiatric care. It was all in theory that I wanted to do. So I wasn't actually going to make that leap right away, but I needed some push, and I got a push. I had a company reach out to me that kind of their focus was on finding psychiatrists wanting to start a ketamine treatment, and then helping them
Ah,
get it off the ground. Like, where are you going to order it from, the malpractice
yeah.
insurance carrier, and then here's the protocols, and then we'll help you, kind of take schedule appointments and
Okay.
manage it in your practice and adding it to your practice. So I wasn't adding it. I actually was creating a practice just to do this concept. So I did it. Very first patient I treated with it. That's when it actually became, where the light bulb moment was, seeing somebody. She had tried every medication. She had gone through ECT. She had gone through TM,
Oh,
transcranial
man.
magnetic stimulation.
Man.
She was like, I've had suicidal thoughts off and on for 20 years. She's had at least 15, 20 inpatient admissions. These are the kind of situations where we're just hoping to keep somebody safe and alive, let alone get them to remission at this point after
Yeah.
she's been through decades of this. Um, Within 2 infusions out of the 6 infusion course, I mean, the mom was with her and crying. I have my daughter back, and she's like, I haven't seen her like this in decades. And, she's still maintaining on it to this day, years later, and really regained control of her life. And that was one of those cases where I knew in the past I would have there was nothing I was going to do that
Yeah.
somebody else couldn't figure out. It was going
Yeah.
to be
Of course.
so. Now I'm like, I'm all in now. If this is ketamine can be this robust of an improvement in such a treatment refractory case, there has to be a place for this, considering the
Yes.
suicide epidemic, and the level of mental health prevalence in the country going up. So I still did not understand at that point.
Mm.
I guess Completely. I knew psychedelic medicines were in the pipeline and being studied. We were still a ways away from that at this point. As 2016, 2017. And I didn't even understand completely the model that ketamine should be administered in. I didn't get it at the beginning because psychiatrists don't use ketamine normally. We're not trained on ketamine, and I didn't, so anesthesiologists, ER docs, so they were also being able to administer this med. Being a psychiatrist and offering ketamine now, to me, it's imperative that mental health specialists are involved. They have to be involved. Therapists and psychiatric
Yes.
oversight
Yeah.
have to be there because these are really complicated situations for where patients are really need follow up, screening, monitoring. I mean, it's not as simple as just giving the medication. I started getting a lot of patients coming to me from other, like, I guess, ketamine practices that were opening up, and they were saying,
Mm.
"Well, we got ketamine, and I'm doing a better now. What do I do with my Prozac, or what do I do
Yeah.
with my therapy, or how?" And the ketamine practice that they went to might not have a mental health specialist, so they would say, "Talk to your psychiatrist." And the psychiatrist at that point would either have a knee-jerk reaction,
Yeah.
like, "How, you went and got ketamine?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
or they'd say, "Oh, well, you're doing good, so let's just pull away all the medicines." Both weren't the right approach. But when they came to us, and then I realized, well, I know exactly what to do because I've been working now with ketamine and traditional treatments
Yes,
together.
yes.
I realized that it has to be integrated into the healthcare system, ketamine, and it should be a tool alongside other tools in your tool
Mhm.
belt. And patients all have different treatment needs. And if one fails, we can try another. We can mix and match different treatments.
Mm.
And I want to take insurance in my clinic. So I ended up turning on insurance and taking patients in just to get some traffic into the clinic because it was a cash only service, lower volumes, doing only ketamine treatment. Nobody understood the treatment back
Oh,
then.
yeah.
There was less awareness about it. Now, I mean, most people know about this treatment. It's all over the mainstream media. It's widely, I guess it's got some like momentum behind it. Some good, some bad. But basically, I once I started seeing patients for general psychiatry, then that they were like suitable candidates for ketamine that I would then offer the service to the right patient,
Mhm.
right time in their treatment journey, and it made everything kind of flow better. Hey, we have a game plan for what you are taking already. We know when
Mhm.
we should adjust meds, and if ketamine is fizzling out, we'll try groups. We'll try adding TMS or theta
Okay.
bursting. When Spravato came out, obviously we offered Spravato, which is the FDA approved
Yeah.
form of intranasal esketamine. So having all the options, sitting in one spot, working with payers, trying to get coverage, trying to help lower costs for patients, and then by the time 2020 rolled around, I was only growing this organically. I was doing most of my time in the addiction world, being a chief medical officer for another set of clinics that we were growing at Symmetria Recovery. It's an opioid treatment program, and we had scaled from 2 to 12 clinics there. So half my time was dedicated to
Hmm.
there, half to my clinic. So then I didn't think that maybe there's a major value here that I should really put all my chips in and focus on my clinics until I started getting calls, for acquisition from various companies in the psychedelic space. And knowing that psychedelic medicine was coming, I wanted to try to set up like where plus I was getting burnt out, to be honest, trying to run practices, see patients, be a chief medical officer, all of it. So let's get some support with let's sell the practice. So I ended up selling it to, a company in September 2021, Wisana Health, and it was not the right fit in terms of their focus was on drug development. Really, amazing protocol.
Oh my goodness, right? A little bit of sweet and sour for you on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it wasn't the right fit, but there's a lot of good from everything that happened. There's always
Yes.
positive that comes
Yeah.
out of everything.
Yes.
There we're in the psychedelic space studying psilocybin with CBD for traumatic brain injury, and it just the focus financially and operationally had to be on for drug development. So what I ended up doing is buying the clinics back in September 2022. Um, and at that point, it was putting together family, friends around some financing, getting a new team together that has a lot of deep healthcare operation experience, multi-site experience. Uh, Ever since then, it's been off to the races. I mean, at that point, we had just opened up our third clinic. Since that time, we've quadrupled and or quintupled in patient visits and revenues and headcount and all of that over the last year and a half, and it's been rapidly growing ever since. And utilizing this model of care where you have a psychotherapist, ketamine
Yep.
certified psychotherapist, you have traditional therapy, you have genetic testing, cognitive testing, Spravato, TMS, and theta bursting. We add it to IV ketamine or Spravato. I mean, we do a lot of things here.
Right.
So the model is sound, and now we're growing. And I realize I don't want to turn my back towards traditional treatments. We still
Yeah.
treat all sorts of patients with traditional meds, but we also work to get people off those meds and try to leverage our interventional and novel
Hmm.
treatments as well, which can have higher success rates and make things easier for patients when in terms of, I guess, getting their medication count down. So.
Yeah. Yes. What is happening? I think I think this again, this show's got a mix of kind of viewership at the end, especially the audio part. What is happening? What's the difference between managing people with the traditional medications that you kind of were talking about, you started, and what actually happens with ketamine?
Mhm.
What's the trick? I mean, not the trick, but what's the magic, right? That's helping people kind of get off the drugs and kind of like you said, the first patient said, "I've got my daughter back." What happened there?
So, for a long time, for decades, the field of psychiatry was heavily kind of focused on psychoanalytic
Hmm.
psychotherapy,
Yes.
kind
Yep.
of Freud kind of lineage, and looking back at childhood. And it was very therapy focused, which is a type of therapy, and it's good
Hmm.
for a lot of patients in different
Yes.
settings, right? With the right therapist. Then with the advent, with technology and the change, the advent and of of SSRIs and the knowledge of the
Yeah.
monoamine neurotrans, looking at serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, that meaning coming out with things like Prozac
Yeah.
and all the meds that followed, it became very biological symptom management. We don't know for sure if serotonin receptors, the regulation going up or down in the brain is the true cause of
Hmm.
the etiology of depression. That's still to be really proven out. And actually, we're thinking it may not be. But that was all we got. We got some symptom relief. Some patients
Hmm.
it helped a lot. A lot of them it never helped at all, caused a lot of negatives. And it was all we outsource all the therapy to let's say to a psychotherapist, and
Yeah.
psychiatrists would just write the meds and never really get it. Both hands aren't talking
Yeah.
to each other,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's a.
it's not the right approach. But like ketamine brought it back to that intersection in the middle, and
Hmm.
this is why I'm excited for future treatments, obviously that are being studied now, psychedelic medicine, which have been around a while, but were kind of put in the dark ages for a while. The research behind it now is there's been a resurrection of studies on psychedelics, but the concept's the same. It's the intersection between the biology and psychology of an issue. So at one element, ketamine has a medical benefit, and
Mm.
ketamine is causing neuroplasticity, which basically it's a hot buzzword,
Mhm.
neuroplasticity.
Yeah, yes.
A lot of ways it means your brain is basically kind of waking up and reconnecting and moldable. Those neuronal pathways are repairing, and receptors are being synthesized. So that allows you to get out of that narrow rigid form of thinking that you are in when you're anxious or depressed. It's
Mhm.
hard to zoom out. It's hard to change a thought pattern or behavior.
Yes.
Neuroplasticity can make your behaviors and thoughts moldable to a whole new way of looking at things. So that neuroplasticity is being triggered by the release of BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. Ketamine's doing that if you don't give too much of it or too little of it, and you're in the right range. That's why I like IV in
Mhm.
clinic own like setting for ketamine, monitored setting, IV where I have full control. There
Mhm.
are other ways to do it, but it should always be monitored. But if you do repeated treatments, you get this cumulative snowball effect where your brain's getting more and more neuroplastic. And it'll, by the end of the induction series, people are really able to look at things differently. But it also helps balance like the brakes and the gas pedal of the nervous system, the GABA and the glutamate. That's all medical benefit, but that's only part of it. The other part is the psychological, and that is when you're in an altered state of consciousness,
Hmm.
kind of means a dissociative anesthetic. So it pulls you out of your body, so to speak. During the actual treatment, I mean, you're some going on a journey. I mean, you could be looking at an old traumatic memory with vivid clarity and a whole new vantage point, but without all the negative associated emotions.
With the emotions gone. Interesting.
Yeah, like, well, like, yeah, so you're able to reprocess it without letting the sympathetic nervous system
Hmm.
overload, your heart racing and all that just completely derail everything and take over that moment. Then at the same time, you are also like able to sometimes in depression, this is very helpful, where you're able to look at yourself from a different angle. My role, my identity, I'm not who I thought I am. My perspective can shift. They call it ego dissolution or ego death. It's almost like your framework that you're defining yourself as has shifted. And that happens because you're able to look at yourself from
Yes.
not your within your own like perspective. So those are kind of psychological breakthroughs. Some people it's more abstract, feeling a connection. Some people it's not that transformative. I mean, sometimes it's just
Mm.
kind of relaxing and you're just there, and but they're still getting the medical benefit out of it.
Yeah, the
So
physical benefit.
because
Yeah,
of that, you're right in the middle now, and that you get high success rates. I mean, in our clinic, 74% of patients that when we looked at our data achieved either remission or a full 50% or greater response, which is
wow.
really high. And we're studying things like adding theta burst stimulation on right before each IV ketamine treatment and trying to see if that produces better results. Even trying to leverage the synergistic combinations of these treatments
Mm.
has even more promise going forward. So psychedelic medicines, we're ready for those. Those are longer duration treatments that have the same concepts as ketamine, but except that the altered state of consciousness is very different. It's longer
Mhm.
duration. It's a different protocol of how to get the results. We'll be ready for that when that's hopefully approved this coming year, and we'll have a different site dedicated just for those kind of treatments once the FDA gives their green light, hopefully.
What is the data burst? I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, I mean, data burst stimulation. So transcranial magnetic stimulation, you're probably familiar with, and that's TMS, and that's FDA approved for
Yep.
depression and anxious depression, OCD. If you give it instead of like let's say a 20-minute treatment, we give it with theta waves and a different delivery protocol, and it makes it a 3-minute treatment instead.
Oh.
Sometimes people do theta burst accelerated protocols where instead of doing for 6 7 weeks 5 days a week 20-minute treatments, they might do like let's say 4 treatments in one day separated by an hour each, and each treatment's 3 minutes, and you do that 3 days a week for 2 weeks and produce the similar results. There's other protocols like one out of Stanford called the same protocol. Then there's accelerated protocols. So theta burst is a 3-minute version of it, and if you actually add that, there's some preliminary data and early
Mhm.
data where if you add it like kind of with ketamine, it might be a synergistic benefit. Has to be proven out all the way, but that could be promising because it's like causing neuroplasticity as well, just a whole different way and not stepping
Okay.
on
Okay.
ketamine's toes. So,
Oh, I could see those 2 combining make it that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah, we do that. Work people get long. Our goal in our clinic is always the least frequent and the least amount of ketamine for a person to keep them well. Like we don't want it where we bring them more and more frequently in for treatments ongoing. We want the longest maintenance interval possible. Our average is about 6.5, 7 weeks roughly in our clinic. Every 6.5, 7 weeks, somebody comes in for a treatment. Some people need it every 2, 3, 4 weeks. Some need it every
Mhm.
6 to 9 months. But if somebody's not getting very far on their interval. That's more money out of their pocket to come in for treatment. It's
Hmm.
more treatment, and it's still not IV ketamine, not FDA approved yet. So it's off label. I think the safety data is pretty good on it. The efficacy data has been great, but it takes time to get it through. But for those reasons, like we'll add things like data burst to make the interval go longer. You don't need as frequent ketamine when you add that in, things like that. So it's all about getting patients the most accessible, feasible, long-term success
Hmm.
um, as as possible. So
Yeah, I think it's this idea of the neuroplasticity, and it makes so much sense to me how it's how fragile the brain is, and what happens over the years to somebody we don't know, right? The injuries or the traumatic injuries, whether it's a physical injury or a traumatic injury, and kind of causing disruptions in the brain. And I think all of us can identify with that, getting into a rut of thinking, into a space where you're just kind of repetitively focusing on the wrong stuff, some negative thoughts, and the techniques you learn over time. I was very fortunate because I was in sales. I ended up in sales quite early, and back in the day, you drive around in your car and listen to motivational tapes, and
mhm.
a lot of those were, looking back on them, and especially in the framework of my knowledge now, they were very positive for mental health. Although they were talking, because if you're an insurance salesperson or selling some kind of hardware, door to door, you're going to get a lot of rejection. So, you need your own therapist, right? You need to get back in the car and have a therapy session after every day on your way home, because you probably, unless you sold something, you probably had a lot of rough moments. And that's, pretty smashing to your ego and your brain and everything. Um, so to have somebody kind of talking you through different ways to think, I could even, I look back and some of that was, almost neuroplasticity kind of positive moments because it's kind of helping you reprogram your brain and kind
Yes.
of keeping you out of those ruts of negativity and trying to get, climb out of that track and try to get on that, like you said, looking back as a third in a way, out of disassociated kind of way.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you talk about sales, and it just reminds me like my very first job when I was 15 was door-to-door sales for the Chicago Tribune
I love
newspaper.
it. I love
Um,
it.
and it was door slam after door slam after door slam. And I'm like, I'm never going into sales. But truth is, it does kind of, I guess, build resolve and you find ways to adapt. And you can have neuroplasticity without medications. It just takes repetition,
Yeah.
positive, healthy habits, and you can rewire. You can do neuroplasticity in a way. Even certain treatments that are out there, like EMDR, eye movement
Yeah.
desensitization
Yeah.
response for post-traumatic stress disorder. The concept behind it is rewiring your brain so the
Yes. Yes.
traumatic memory doesn't trigger the same negative response. So neuroplasticity is key. But one thing to know in neuroplasticity, it's not as simple as that you do this treatment and your brain is in a neuroplastic state. Let's say you don't do anything else to help settle the concrete in a healthy way.
Mm.
You get these new patterns, new thoughts, and you just do treatment. If you stop the maintenance treatment, people will many times slip back to where they were, old habits.
Yeah.
You sometimes better, their baseline's a little better, but um, you need to keep focusing on it. You have to actually, even with psychedelics in the future, it's heavily focused on psychotherapy and this concept of integration of your experience. So now that you have a neuroplastic brain and your symptoms are gone,
Mhm.
how are you going to keep that from like returning back to your old habits, old
Right.
triggers? So you have to not only with the treatment, but also psychologically and behaviorally keep focusing on maintaining healthy
Mhm.
lifestyles and making those habit. The neuroplasticity from ketamine helps you start those changes and start making those changes and lets it settle in a new way. But if you did nothing like to support it and you just stick to your old ways, I mean, people will regress. I mean, so it's a chronic disease model. Yeah, I think some treatments that are in focus on neuroplasticity, like TMS, has a lot of durability after doing a round of it. People can stay well for a while after that. Uh, Some of the psychedelic studies coming out, like with the MAP studies for MDMA, for PTSD, showed pretty good durability where people were still doing well and didn't qualify for PTSD
Hmm.
months later. So compared to maybe ketamine's a little shorter. I mean, I think some of the benefits do wear off quicker. However, being that it's a short acting effect and very easily obtained now, it's helping to make an impact. But what I think in the future we're going to see is that, there'll be different types of psychedelic therapies and different types of altered states, and each of them have pros and cons and fit a
Yeah.
different patient mold and type.
Yes.
Short acting, long acting, mid acting,
Hmm.
how physiological one is, how psychological of an effect it
Okay.
is. People will gravitate towards different ones. You can't expect one to fit everybody. This is not an easy thing to go into something that alters your consciousness. You need a safe, trustworthy staff around you who's experienced and that they're
Hmm.
trained specialists in this and that they're to support you.
Yeah.
That's why you
Through.
shouldn't do it at home. I don't think we're there yet, or doing it
Oh, yeah.
supervised, or it opens you up to a lot of potential negative
Can
experiences.
go the wrong way. Yeah, I think it can go. I put up the hopemarkhealth.com, which is your clinic's name, and you're in Chicago area. What part of Chicago?
Yeah. So Hope Mark Health, forever we were Advanced Psychiatric Solutions, my original clinic name, which my marketing team told me that's not very trademarkable. As
Yeah.
so we really need to finalize a name that really embodies what we're trying to do here. And hope is the key that we give patients
Mhm.
when they come to,
I
okay,
love it.
doesn't matter what you've been through. We have all these new options here,
Yeah.
mix and match different ones. We're going to try it a different way. And here's our success rate. So it gives people some hope. But Hope Mark Health, we have 5 locations right now in Chicagoland area, one in downtown, the one in Oak Brook, Orland Park, Hoffman Estates, Naperville, so they're spread around the suburbs, and then one in
Mm,
back to the Loop, right in Millennium Park. So,
okay.
and then we'll be, obviously continuing to grow this year and building more locations.
I really like. I think it's important to remind people that like what you were saying, that it's integrating all the traditional therapies, right? Providing that kind of that on the journey, right? So somewhere along the journey, on that journey to mental health, there's all different kinds of tools, and you've gone from just traditional to kind of expanding your tool set and really being able to help people with the different tools in your toolkit. And I think
Yeah.
that's and then doing it in a clinical setting with the right professionals around you, as opposed to just offering just a particular vertical.
Exactly. Yeah. These are like ketamine is assisting the psychotherapy and the
Hmm.
treatment, or even assisting the medication plan. Like it's a tool. So is TMS. So is Spravato, theta bursting. So we're diversified basically, and patients can come into Hope Mark Health with anything that needs mental health help, like even if it's just mild public speaking anxiety, we will still treat you. We're comprehensive, so we're not going to turn you away because of that. Or if you have a substance use disorder, I'm board certified in that. We offer many treatments for that. We can even in some cases leverage things like ketamine to actually help somebody suffering from certain substance use disorders. So we have a lot of tools, and all comers welcome, whether it's severe treatment resistant cases, acute cases. We try to keep people out of the hospital with these
Mm.
treatments, or just mild traditional care. And in the future, if something changes where you're struggling and we're not getting somewhere with those, and
Mhm.
it's time for one of those others, you'll know about it. You'll be offered it. We're here to educate you and then move you into one of those service lines.
Sounds great. I really want to thank you for spending time. It's already, we've already kind of hit my traditional mark. I learned a little bit today. Really interesting. I love your journey. Honestly, I really love your journey and just that openness that
Thank
you've
you. I
got.
appreciate it. I could talk on you probably get me going. I'll go. I can do 5 more of these with you, Ken.
Yeah, we could
Talk
go.
about
We'll start to maybe pick. We could pick a kind of a real focus topic one
Yeah.
day. Actually thinking. in the new year, I want to change this up a little bit, and I think I'm going to do some panels. I'll
That
do
would
a
be
bit of some
great.
groups, and bring a few different people in and have a conversation as a group. And then I could just kind of introduce the group, and I can step back and let the group go, right? And let the conversation just kind of fly, because you probably don't get that opportunity to have these kind of sidebar conversations with other people in the profession as much as you'd like.
Yeah, we mean, obviously, like, I guess, we do panels at different conferences, and there's
Yeah.
different, not as much as we like, though. But, a lot of us are obviously communicate on the side as much as we can. But yes,
Yeah.
having a discussion, because there's different viewpoints and different
Yes.
philosophies of care, being open to it all and putting it all in one spot to discuss, gives somebody just a broader kind of snapshot instead of
Mhm.
just my snapshot only.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then it's, the one of the objectives of this show has been really to highlight the people, and to, again, if you're listening on the audio version, hopemarkhealth.com in the Chicago area, and is to highlight people and their facilities and how people can find you. And I think changing it now to a group discussion, it'll be a little bit different focus, less on the individual and what they're doing, and more on the topic, right? And really deep diving and peeling back a particular topic.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity.
It's been fun. Hang around for a bit. I'll see you. I got a little exit video,
Yep,
a little exit commercial, and then I'll see you on the other side.
sounds good.
Dr. Nazeer, thanks so much again for being a guest. Thanks everybody for listening and supporting mental health today, especially the audio people listening in your cars, listening on a podcast. Hope you learned a little something today. You can also follow us at the other program we do, I do, is the jar.live. Great stuff where we hear individual stories about their journey in life, really, and it's around great questions. See you all on the other side. Thanks again.
Yeah, loose, baby.
But we're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals at Public Glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glassblowing. Yeah, we're gonna go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.